Now, victimization surveys are also extremely useful. These ask people whether or not they've been the victim of a crime. But there's much more to that, to these surveys than the title implies. Canada even conducts national victimization surveys, the latest of which took place in 2014, conducted by Statistics Canada. And remember that when huge surveys like these occur, it can take a really long time to process them, so to speak, and then publish the results. Now, what kinds of things does a victimization survey ask? Here you can see kind of the general topics, and I'm going to give you several examples of questions that you would actually be asked in this victimization survey, because it's not just regarding being the victim of a crime, really. It also includes, for example, general perceptions of your local police. Do you feel like you can approach them? Do you feel like they respond as quickly as they should? Do you feel that the local police are fair to people? Um, I've included several examples of questions and to give you an idea of the kinds of things that you'd be asked about. You might be asked about, even if you haven't been a victim of a crime, what kind of protection measures do you take in order to try to prevent yourself from being a victim? So, do you ever install new locks in your house? Um, have you obtained a gun? Although that's much more difficult in Canada than in the United States. So even though you've never been a victim, or maybe you have, and in reaction to that, what have you done to try to prevent yourself from being a victim again? Now, note when respondents are asked specific questions in this survey, a definition is given that's clear and also very simple, outlining exactly what the question is referring to, because they want to make sure that respondents have as little confusion as possible. And you also want to make sure that the response to the question provides the kind of information you're looking for. Not the answer you're looking for, but the kind of information you're looking for. So, household theft. I like that they included something like yard furniture, or I don't know, maybe something from the garden. By that I mean, like, lights or something like that. So they're very specific about the kind of information they're looking for and what they are referring to. Personal property theft. I'm just thinking, I was even in North Bay, we sometimes have trouble with young people going through cars. And the police asked the public, this was a few years ago, put it in the newspaper or something, if somebody has gone through your car, even if they haven't taken anything, please call us and let us know, because we try to track the patterns of where people are doing this. Didn't take anything from my car, not even my CDs. I guess they didn't like my music. And theft refers to where you live. It refers to your vehicle. It refers to your person. It also asks about crime of a physical nature. And again, very specific about what they're asking about. So if you want to pause this or go forward or back or whatever to take a closer look at these questions, absolutely feel free to do so. I find it interesting, the kind of information that they look for. And I'm impressed with how thorough the survey is. And of course, as I say that, I'm thinking, of course, Jennifer, it's StatsCan. They better be thorough. They're like the gold standard of research. But it really is thorough. I mean, things I simply wouldn't have thought of, and until I was into it. And with this day and age, it also includes questions regarding stalking. I think people are much more familiar with this idea and concept and exactly what it is than they were, for example, when I was in high school in the 80s. At the same time, research indicates that, especially with young people, they don't realize if somebody is stalking them, doing something in an inappropriate manner. So I'm not going to go through all the statistics in the textbook regarding the national survey. Be sure to read it. It is interesting, and it is information you should be aware of. So victimization surveys are absolutely very, very useful in terms of crime statistics as well. Now, in trying to understand criminal activity, of course, it's also relevant to have an idea of who is most likely to be involved in crime. What do we know about age groups and gender and race? For example, we know that in Canada, men account for approximately 3/4 of criminal cases and women for 1/4. But every year that's decreasing and evening out just slightly. I'm going to talk about that a bit when I talk about the feminist perspective. In terms of age, it is not a stereotype to say that the majority of crime is committed by younger people. So it's not just like, an older person stereotype. Oh, those young kids, they're always getting in trouble. No, it's actually true. That's who commits the majority of crime. But I want to bring race into the discussion. What do crime statistics tell us about the role race plays in the profile of perpetrators? First Nations people in Canada account for approximately 4% of the total population, but they represent about 25% of our federal inmate population. And I'm going to say that again. I don't want to just skip over that statistic and go on. I want you to really think about that. Only 4% of the population, but about 1/4 of inmates. That's astounding that First Nations people are so overrepresented. And of course, the first question most of us would ask is, why? Is this in some way a remnant of the failed residential school system of the past? Does location have anything to do with it? Education, what is it? As outlined in the text, Aboriginal people tend to have a lower economic status, and in tandem with this, a lower socioeconomic status. And a lower economic status is associated with higher rates of crime, no matter who they are, no matter what their race is, not just First Nations people. So that's one thing. Something else that factors into this is that Canada's young Aboriginal population is very large. And as I just explained, it's not a stereotype that people between the ages of 15 to 24 are responsible for the majority of crime in Canada. And another reason that you might not think of right off the top of your head is how street crimes are more likely to be reported than white-collar crime. So street crime is generally those crimes that are committed in a public place, like robbery or break and enter, or some kind of assault, or drug use, or drug sales, or vandalism. And these are more common among people of a lower economic status. So whereas white-collar crime is those offenses committed by higher status people in the course of their work. And also remember, I commented on how often crimes are not reported. Those usually committed by Aboriginal people are also the kind that happen to be most reported. Yet another explanation, or at least part of it, harks back to what I spoke about in the last chapter about racial profiling. Canadian police, our justice system, and other offices associated with the justice system may discriminate against First Nations people and simply arrest them more. So if a person is Aboriginal, it's theorized they may be more likely to be stopped, whether that means being pulled over in their car or stopped on the street in question or whatever. When that happens, they're also more likely to be brought before the justice system. And if that happens, they are more likely to be convicted than a white person. So this directly relates to the last point made in the text. Maybe it would be more accurate to say that it expands on it, that Western culture does not mesh with Aboriginal culture, and as a result, Aboriginal culture as a whole has been disrupted. So this is not just some philosophical statement meaning something in general. It means that for First Nations people in Canada, their ties to their communities have weakened as a result of meeting with Western culture. Yes, this is then in part a lasting effect of the residential school system, but also is just an effect of the current social and cultural circumstances. As I said, this is related to the idea of racial profiling, when a person or group is suspected or targeted based on a stereotype about their race. Typically, but not always, profiling is carried out by persons in positions of authority. So, some examples of profiling include a police officer assuming somebody is more likely to have committed a crime because they're African American. And the textbook points out that a middle class or affluent black male is more likely to be stopped driving a nice car than an obviously less affluent black male, suggesting there's this unstated question of how could a black man rightfully have something like that. A private security guard following a shopper because they believe the shopper is more likely to steal from a store because of their skin color. A criminal justice system official refuses bail to a Latin American person because of a belief that people from their country are more violent. In Regina, in November of 2017, a video was posted online of an employee in a Giant Tiger store openly following a customer who is Aboriginal. And the customer actually began to film the whole thing, and during the video explained that every time he went to that store, this employee would follow him around, almost expecting him to steal, waiting for him to steal. And I've actually posted a link to this article in the overview for this week, which also includes the video. The video is just under 5 minutes long, so it's not very long. And these are all examples of racial profiling. So all of this provides a general introduction to crime and deviance. And then, as I've said before, in pretty much every chapter, we're going to look at whatever the topic is from the perspective of different sociological theories. And the first one we're going to look at is symbolic interactionism. How would it explain crime and deviance? Remember that it looks at how people develop meaning in their world. It focuses on socialization. So symbolic interaction generally explains deviance and crime by stating that people learn to be deviant. They learn to behave in a criminal manner. So it would look at how a person is raised, their social circumstances, how they've been socialized. But how does this happen? How does somebody learn to break social norms or even to break the law? Well, they would learn in the same way you would learn anything. Somebody who is experienced teaches you. Just like how you would learn to tie the laces on your shoe, or how you would learn to print, or how a child generally learns the attitudes and perceptions that they have from their parents. So if you have very racist parents, you're likely to have a racist child. So deviant behavior requires those who are already deviant to teach you how to be deviant, either outright teach you or socialize you in that manner. So whether it's a mild form of deviance or more serious, such as breaking the law. And the more you're exposed to that, the more likely you will follow the example set for you. The more likely you're exposed to a specific deviant behavior, or even just a deviant lifestyle in general, the more likely you'll view that as the norm. Because to you, it won't be deviant. To you, it will be typical, a normal lifestyle. And this will be influenced by what is available in your area. So yes, this may mean somebody is actually taught how to break into a house or taught how to hotwire a car. But it may also mean, in a more general sense, that somebody is socialized to be deviant, that they are socialized to disregard societal norms. Now, part of this symbolic interaction approach to deviance and crime is labeling theory. And what labeling theory says is that deviance results not so much from the actions of the deviant person as from the response of others who labels the rule breaker as deviant. And I'll explain that again. In other words, when you label somebody as deviant, that leads them to engage in deviant behavior. A person will begin to identify and act in ways that reflect how others label them, kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm going to give you an example of this. It's not totally uncommon, in my opinion, for teens to do certain things during their teen years that are not entirely positive. Going through somebody else's yard to get somewhere, which is technically trespassing. Maybe skipping class sometimes. Drinking underage. Doing some mild drugs. Not everybody does these things, but they're not totally uncommon. Dare I say they're not totally unexpected during a certain age bracket. Now, in a more affluent neighborhood or a more affluent family, when a teenager does these things, they may be regarded by parents and teachers and even the police, if they're involved, as just part of growing up. It's an aspect of the process of growing up. Not super positive, certainly, but also not cause to totally freak out. So on the screen right now is a picture of a young man in Texas, I believe, who was driving drunk, and he killed 4 people. And the defense put forth at his trial was that he was suffering from affluenza, which means, they said, that because he was raised in a very well-to-do household, he had never been raised to really take responsibility for himself and to be empathetic towards other people and think of other people. And because of that, that's the way he is. That's why he's such a selfish person, and that's why he was driving drunk, and he shouldn't be held responsible for what he did. Now, in a poorer area, all these examples I gave you about teenagers and stuff that they might do, these exact same activities by somebody in the same age bracket might be viewed as demonstrating a tendency towards juvenile delinquency. You better keep an eye on your kid because they're starting to run with a bad crowd and they're getting out of control, and this is going to lead to something even worse. So this suggests a few things. First, quite clearly, that differences in economic class play an important role in the process of assigning labels of deviance to somebody. And that's why I like this cartoon I found online so much. I think this is a really simple and frankly accurate portrayal of what often happens when you see young people from very, very affluent families doing something deviant or criminal compared to somebody from a less affluent family. And second thing this brings into play is that race can play an important role in assigning labels of deviance. For example, research has demonstrated that black girls and boys tend to be disciplined more frequently and more harshly by teachers and school administrators than our peers of other races, even though there's no evidence to suggest that they actually misbehave more frequently. Similarly, and with much more severe consequences, for example, in the United States, statistics show that American police kill black people at a far higher rate than white people, even when they are unarmed and have committed no crime. And this suggests that the misapplication of deviant labels is a result of racial stereotypes. So, to kind of summarize symbolic interaction, it explains deviance and crime by saying that people learn to be deviant. They learn to behave in a deviant manner. They are socialized like that. And symbolic interaction also focuses on labeling theory, stating that being labeled deviant leads a person to engage in deviant behavior. A person will begin to identify and act in ways that reflect how other people label them, kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.